Yo, what's happening, people? I want to welcome you to Flip the Script podcast show. My name is Sol and I am the host. So, on this show, you'll get the opportunity to listen to some inspiring people talking about real, honest, heartfelt, no holds barred transformation stories. We get to hear from ex-drug users, reformed criminals, all sharing their personal stories and how they manage not only to turn their lives around, but now are helping others to do the same. We also get to hear from courageous men and women sharing their experience of surviving high-level trauma and what they are doing or done to start that much-needed healing process.
How I felt internally, very broken. I'd class myself as like a very broken spirit, you know. I'd always mess it up or I'd always push people away, you know. Nobody got to know the true me. And as I was drinking it, I was crying and something said to me, the game is up, you are so done.
Yo, what's happening, people? I want to welcome you to Flip the Script podcast show.
So, once again, welcome to Flip the Script podcast show. And this afternoon, I have got the wonderful Roxie, who is come along to speak about her transformation story. So, Roxie, just tell us a little bit about yourself. And welcome.
Cool. Thank you so much for having me on. As you know, I love to talk. So I'm really grateful that you invited me to come along today and, to talk about, my transformation, which, hasn't been done by myself. I've got a lot of people to thank that have been part of a journey. So thank you for having me here. And I always think about this, like, where do you start? You know, when you kind of think about a transformation, I kind of feel like that I've had many transformations along my life, actually. Not just kind of like one, there's been bigger things that have happened, but I think kind of like, for me, when I look back at my childhood, there is mental illness in my family. And, as a young child, I always say I felt like there was a dark cloud that kind of followed me everywhere I went. I was always a very anxious child. I would have really dark dreams about horrible things happening, and I don't think it was any surprise that when I was 16, I was having severe panic attacks. I wasn't able to get on public transport, and I was diagnosed at 16 with clinical depression, which back then that was quite young. And I remember being put forward for like a series of counselling, and I hated the woman. She just was like this old lady, and she was like, so how did that make you feel? And I think just back then I wasn't ready for a journey, but I do recall her talking about a book which kind of, I think, set me on a journey, and it was Louise Hay, You Can Heal Your Life.
Yep, know it.
And I kind of, at that age, I think one of the things I was always really confused about was kind of, people around me told me, when you get the job, when you are in the relationship, when you get the home, when you get, you get the holidays, that you'll be happy. And I kind of felt like that a lot of my life was how I felt internally, very broken. I'd class myself as like a very broken spirit, and I kind of was under an illusion that happiness was out there. It was somewhere to be found, if only I could. And that started off at a really young age. At 14, I'd go to school, I'd come back after school and I'd work 2 jobs because, money and status become really important, even at a young age. And it was almost like I would try and buy people with that because I didn't feel comfortable with who I was. And I think at a young age, I really started to create an external persona of somebody who was very confident, very outgoing. Everybody would come to me with their problems, but behind closed doors, that wasn't the truth. I was riddled with anxiety and depression and panic. And I think what started to happen, at an early age is how I reduced that was by drinking alcohol. Because I tell you what, it got rid of all that fear. It kind of connected me. I felt like, woohoo, like this is like the world is now like really happy and shiny, and And again, I think part of that 2 jobs at school was to make sure that I was able to have a lifestyle of clothes, cigarettes, and alcohol.
So you spoke a little bit about, you recognised that you had anxiety and you didn't didn't quite fit into the world, so you put on these masks and stuff like that. Tell me a little bit about what it felt like having that anxiety. How would you, apart from acting out on it and putting the mask, what was the feeling? If you could describe the feeling a little bit.
Yeah, just always like on the inside, like this kind of I learned in therapy this kind of, to name this chatterbox, and I call her Mavis, but she was always chatting. You are ugly. You are so fat. Nobody likes you. Kind of all of these things. And what I would do is I'd kind of, inwardly, I would always have this kind of, I wouldn't say like, it didn't come across as nervous disposition, but it was always like inwardly I was never good enough. So I would overcompensate externally. And I could never be myself, so I could never relax and have a conversation. I would always be in my mind, what are they thinking? What am I going to say next? Will they like me? Just this constant, chatter. That went round and round.
Okay, so it was it manifested a negative narrative in your head that constantly just like a tape playing. Yeah, okay, I get that. Cool. And so you said that you kind of used outwardly materialistic stuff. Was it? Did you say like you had 2 jobs, money, and that kind of made you feel a little bit better? Well, that masked you, you said, and then you got onto alcohol and cigarettes. And so tell me a little bit about that kind of that part of your journey. How was it for you? I mean, you were 16, did you say? I can't remember what you said.
Yeah, well, it was. Yeah, I was quite young. I mean, when I started drinking, but at 16, I left school and I got a job in a local factory. And this was at the time I had to work there because I had to, my mum was a single parent then and had 4 of us. So I was the oldest of 4. So I was kind of quite responsible for, helping her pay the mortgage and stuff. But I remember that being quite a fun time in my life because I always kind of like, again, as a child, I could never wait to be the adult. I'd always be in a bar and I'd see all the other people and I'd be like, I want to be like them. They look really happy and they look really free. So I kind of got to that point in my life where, I'm earning money. All my friends are going to college or like doing cool stuff. I'm working in a factory, but loving it. And for the first time, just feeling like I'm part of something. But it was just weird, I couldn't connect. And I think what started to happen was I'd have groups of friends, but I think because of, I'd always mess it up or I'd always push people away. Nobody got to know the true me.
Okay. So you said connect. Is that connected just to others or was it higher power, source energy, or what is connected to yourself? What did you mean by you just couldn't connect?
Well, in that moment in time, looking back then, because I'll go on to talk about my spiritual journey as we go on, but in that, like when I say I couldn't connect, it was kind of like I didn't really know how to have conversations. Like it sounds really silly, but because of the inward anxiety, I couldn't. I would have to have alcohol to be able to almost like relax into the real me, if that makes any sense at all.
Makes total sense. I get it. Yeah. So you use alcohol to give you confidence, just to, I suppose, to be able to talk to people like normally, what you thought would be normal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So after I'd had a few drinks, I would feel like I was like the other normal people. Do you know what I mean? Like I could kind of almost felt like, I'm on your level. I can chat now and I can dance and I can be free. But unfortunately, I was one of those people that once I started drinking, I couldn't stop. And I caused some big damage. Yeah.
Okay. So how long was your drinking? How long did you drink for?
So I started drinking at the age of 14 and I stopped at the age of 34.
Okay. So how did it progress? Tell me a little bit about the drinking. I mean, because it's at first, usually, when you have a drink, it's not the first thing you think, this is going to destroy my life. No. you said you found alcohol and it was like, wow, this is making me feel good. I'm partying, everybody loves me, I'm out there with everyone. Whoa, you know what I mean? And then when did it get bad, as they say?
So when I look back now, like on my journey, what was really obvious is that even from my first drink, it wasn't like my friends. Like I just remember the bottle of cider, you know, like the big bottles of Merry Down we'd all get somehow. And mine would be gone before my friends had even opened theirs, you know. So it was kind of like, even at a young age, but like there was an element of fun. But I was always the one that was getting everyone into trouble, you know, like if like the parents would say, oh, don't hang out with her, you know, she's bad news, because I just was always the one that was like the life and soul of the party. But it was like I took hostages, and once they started drinking with me, they kind of couldn't get away.
Yeah.
But as time went on, so kind of what kind of happened for me was I was under this illusion that, as I said before, kind of like part of my story is it was this external search for happiness. And I was utterly convinced that my misery, you know, my depression, my anxiety was because of this country. I was like, well, if I lived somewhere that was sunnier, better, you know, everything would be okay. And I remember I trained as a beauty therapist after I left the factory. I flew to Istanbul to Turkey to work as a beauty therapist. And, you know, when I got there, and I was just like, it was the same thing. It was just me, you know, and again, not realizing that I had a problem. I come home, I ended up then moving out to Chicago. Same thing happened, you know, Ibiza, just constantly like on this lookout for something to just make me feel better. And even though like alcohol did it in the beginning, what started to happen was probably I got to about the age of, I got back from America, maybe I was about 22, 23, and I kind of really realized that, you know, I started to really notice that my friends around me had started to settle down, had started to have families. And I was, you know, in my mind, I was like, well, I'm gonna get a good job. I'm gonna work hard. I'm gonna get a good job. I'm gonna buy a place. I'm gonna do all these things. I was quite determined, and you know, and I really tried to apply myself. And the thing is I'd get somewhere, but then I would smash it all to pieces. So I got a really good job. I bought my first property at the age of 23. But I just remember, do you know what? I remember feeling suicidal, and I remember thinking, is this it? You know, like, is this it? And it was almost like, because of that, I was drinking even more. And this is at the age of 23 on such a high dose of medication, you know, suffering massively with panic attacks. But yet the thing is that outwardly you never would have known.
Okay, so was it quite hidden then, would you say, like your alcoholism? And I say alcoholism, I mean like your problem with drinking and the medication that you never knew nothing.
So good. I had constructed such a mask of nothing to see here, you know, everything is. And I think that's kind of a, you know, for me, and the mental illness was one of the things I think that made it worse, because I wouldn't sit down with anyone and say, you know what, I'm really struggling, or go into work the next day and talk about the suicide attempt that I had the night before. You know, it was all done in shame. And I would just pretend the next day like nothing's actually happened.
Okay. Did anyone ever say to you though, Roxie, you don't, I mean, because we can say that sometimes we can put on we think we're putting on a really good mask, that we're really functioning, but others around us might be like, no, we already knew that you was like kind of a little bit of a handful or whatever when it comes to like, you know, like if you was going for work drinks or whatever. Did anybody ever come up to you afterwards to say to you, look, Rox, we kind of knew you was a bit of a problem? Did you ever?
It's so funny. So looking back, like nobody, like in my jobs, like I often wonder, because I was always the one that was never there on a Monday and leaving early, and, you know, and nobody ever said anything to me. But what would happen is like friends would start to move away from me. Right. But I do remember this one friend. I remember her saying to me once, and I just had my son actually. He was very young, and she said, "Your drinking's really out of hand, and if you can't control it," she was like, "you're gonna have to go abstinent." And I just remember looking at her like she was, you know, at that time I was like, well, you know, I'm going through a really hard time at the moment, and actually, you know, I don't appreciate this. But I knew deep down she was right. Like, I knew deep down that she knew me well, and she could see that, especially after I'd had my son, that I had really lost control. And I suppose there was part of that where it was really hard to hide the fact that I'd lost control of my drinking.
Tell me a little about what you mean by lost control. Just give us a day how it would be for Roxie at that time. What was it about you lose?
Yeah, sure. Actually, that's because actually when you say kind of like lost control, you assume that you know, as I think a lot of us do, that I would wake up in the morning and start drinking. That wasn't the case at all. In fact, my morning would start with me being horrifically hungover from the night before, having drunk till maybe 2, 3 in the morning. And I'd come to and I'd wake up and I'd kind of look around, and, you know, the first thing is like, oh, my goodness, what happened last night? Is my son okay? You know, and then I would do that thing where I'd just be like, oh my goodness, like, I'm not going to drink today. And you know, I look back now, and if I'd have taken a lie detector that morning, I would have passed, because there was like every part of me was like, I'm not going to drink today. But what would happen is the day would go on, and I would, you know, I'd start to look at the clock and I'd think, oh goodness, well, it's lunchtime. I can't have a glass of wine yet. So I would kind of like say to myself, well, what I'll do is I'll just have one glass of wine while I'm going to make dinner. And then I'd make dinner and the whole bottle would be gone. And then I'd be like, oh God, I could really do with some more, you know, and then I'd kind of maybe, you know, before I'd gone out and I'd got a bottle of wine and another bottle, and then that would be gone. And then maybe I'd think, oh, well, what I could do is I could order a pizza, not eat the pizza, and then I could order some more wine. And it would just go on like that. Like every day was just this, oh my God, I said that I wouldn't do that again today, you know. And it was heartbreaking, because do you know what? I was so badly wanted to be a good mum, and I could see how it was getting in the way of me functioning and being a good mum. You know, I couldn't be present. I was constantly hungover, or I was drinking.
Okay. So yeah. So what changed then? How did things get better for you, or what was it that was there a lot more of that losing control? How long was did you lose that kind of what you were talking about, the justification of your alcohol not being a good mum? Did that go on for a long while, or did you get some control back? Or
so I think kind of like, so after I did have my son, I went through a really bad period of mental health, and I was on quite a lot of medication, and it was put down to, you know, anxiety. I started getting something called migraine with aura, which is where you lose your sight for kind of like not very long, but it's really scary. I had very compulsive thoughts, and I remember going to the doctors, and I remember the doctor asking me how much I drank, and you know, the first time I went, I lied. I was just like, oh, I have a glass of wine a night, and you know. And then the second time I went, I told him the truth, and he referred me to EDAS, drug and alcohol place. And
okay.
I remember having some counselling there actually, and I remember the guy kind of, you know, do you know what, he said something to me so pivotal, and he just said to me, you know, he said, Rox, he said, do you think if you're trying this hard to control your drinking, that perhaps it's got control of you? And I couldn't accept the fact, because like I said, if you looked externally, I mean, at the time, you know, I was living in quite a plush area of Lower Parkstone. You know, I had a really nice car, you know, I just set up a business, and I was still, I think that kept me in denial for quite some time. And I just, you know, I kind of said to him, nah, I'm all right, you know, but I knew deep down I wasn't. And what happened was, in the end, I moved away from everybody. I ended up moving to the New Forest, and I kind of had this idea that a country house and a toddler and a dog would be a really great idea. And I think that's for me when I gave myself full permission to kind of let go. And you know, the drinking started in the afternoon. I was very isolated. I didn't speak to anybody. You know, my business started to become non-existent because I couldn't function, because I was constantly hungover. And I ended up moving back over to Bournemouth, and I moved into the house that I'm in now. And I remember saying to myself, this is going to be an alcohol-free zone. There's going to be no alcohol. This is like, I was so chuffed. I was like, it's a new start, and I just remember being so excited. And then I went to put the recycling out a week later, and the bin was full. Wow. And I was just like, I was so ashamed. I just remember, like, my head was like, oh, what happened to this being an alcohol-free zone? Like my head started going again. And I got in, and to kind of drown that voice out, I started drinking wine, and I will never forget the memory. And it was like it was yesterday. And as I was drinking it, I was crying, and something said to me, the game is up. You are so done. Because if this doesn't stop, you are not going to live for much longer. And the truth was, I was holding on to my sanity by a shoestring. My son's dad was talking about him going to live in America because it would be better off for him. My inner spirit, my sanity, my self-respect, my dignity. I didn't want to be here. And I knew, it was like I knew with every fiber of my being that for me, I was done. I was absolutely done. Yeah.
They say that sometimes when we kind of we're on a journey, sometimes we need to get to the darkest place to want to change something. I mean, and so you say that you got to a point where you couldn't do it no more. You was done. Everything was just like. So what happened there? What motivated you to change? Or was it somebody else that came into your life, or did you kind of reach out? What happened?
I truly believe for me that kind of that inner knowing that I was done and that I was beat was kind of like, I believe for me it was divine intervention. It was something kind of like a power greater than myself that almost was like, you need to ask for help. You cannot do this on your own. You cannot keep hiding away, because I had become so insular and so ashamed. And I had heard of 12-step programs, and I had heard of abstinence, which terrified me, because I was just like, the reason it terrified me is because I used to think every time I'm not drinking, I am so darn miserable, and all I do is think about drinking. I'd become so self-consumed. My world had become so small. So it was about doing something really different, really, really different. And that involved asking for help, and it involved reaching out. Yeah.
Who did you reach out to? Who did you go to? Was it a friend? Was it somebody that was in the 12-step fellowship? Or did you go to the local services? What was it that got you kind of?
Actually, what was so crazy is, as I said about this divine intervention moment that I had, I ended up looking on the internet and seeing that there was a local meeting to where literally around the corner from where I lived. And again, I just knew I had to go. It was, I can't, like, when I look back now, like, I don't believe that any of that was, I don't know, when we get to that emotional rock bottom, we are willing to do anything. And so I suppose what had happened is the false pretense of my ego and my pride had utterly been smashed out of me. And I think that this egotistical, prideful person had to have that happen, and I've got to be honest, I thought that that was the day that my life was over. I remember sitting there, and I remember thinking, what has happened to my life? How has this happened? What have I done so wrong?
Yeah, this wasn't the dream that I was thinking of. What's happening? What am I doing here?
This wasn't on my what do you want to be when you grow up list.
Yeah, on my vision board.
Yeah, right. It wasn't on my vision board. There was no room for it in amongst all the cars and the houses.
Yeah. Okay. So that was your main kind of. So you got to that point of you sitting there thinking, what the hell is happening? Blah blah blah. So tell me a little bit about how your journey started from there, from stopping. What did you do? What was it?
I had to let go of everything that I thought I needed, everything that I thought so basically I gained a lot of my self-worth from from prestige, from kind of business, from kind of what car I had, what career I had.
Okay.
And I had to let go of all of it. Like I literally, I didn't even have a car in the beginning. And I just remember I was like, I'm going to do this. Do you know what? I was under the illusion, actually, first of all, before I get to that point, that as soon as I stopped drinking, I thought my life is going to be magic. Like, this is going to be great because it's alcohol that's really messing me up. And I just remember really applying myself to this 12-step program. And when I look back now, I've got to be honest, it was one of the happiest times in my life. I think, first of all, I was just so grateful to not be drinking. And second of all, I had kind of like, obviously I have my son, he's a huge responsibility, but because I'd let go of all that other stuff and I didn't have a car and I didn't have much money but it was almost like I was in a place where I actually didn't want for anything. I was just so like, I got to a place in my life where they call it like this true surrender. Like I had really let go of all these old ideas of who I needed to be in the world and what I needed to have. And, I'd become very willing. And I just remember spending days, going through the 12 steps, sitting on buses, learning about addiction, recovery, mental health, being able to take my son to the beach and for the first time, like be there with him, like building sandcastles and, just letting go of everything that I thought I needed that I was holding on to so tightly. And it was such a beautiful time. But as I said, I was under a big illusion that to just stop drinking, everything was going to be magical. And that wasn't the truth. I had a lot of work to do.
So when did you realise that life will kick you in the arse whether you're drinking or not? When was the moment? Yeah.
I was about 18 months sober and I was in such emotional pain. And it was another point in my life where I believe that for me, I kind of hit another rock bottom emotionally. And there was like another layer. It was almost like I had gone as far as I could, but then there was more stuff underneath that. And I hear people talk about things like, like it's really, I think sometimes like life is really easy to navigate when everything's going well. And, you're kind of like life was plain sailing. And then I started to get back to it. So it was almost like, I remember being a year sober and I was like, right, I'm a year sober now. Let's take on the world again. Let's start up a business. Let's get into a relationship. Let's do this. Let's do that. And it was like, oh my goodness. Oh, I see why I drank now.
So you kind of, I suppose you've done a big U-turn around that same, like getting the stuff again. So you got into a rock bottom, 18 months sober. You had a new business, a relationship, blah, blah, blah. And you found it. How did you get through that emotion? Because now okay, so it's not the alcohol no more. You know that alcohol is not the problem here. What was it that you had to do to kind of maybe try to get through that period of your life, that emotional rock bottom?
I think a lot of it for me comes down to really realizing that I had to have balance in my life. And I'm kind of somebody that, if you've got all or nothing there, I kind of swing from one to the other. I don't seem to ever stop in the middle. And actually what I realized for me is that the work can also be another thing that I can use to numb myself.
Okay.
There's this, and this is why, as I'll go on to talk in a bit, is why I deliver something called the Happiness Course, which is based on positive psychology. And there was a lot of my happiness was derived from, again, from external stuff, which is kind of like a really old pattern of mine to work hard, play hard, smash myself to pieces and have to pick myself back up because I don't seem to navigate that balance very well. And that's unfortunately what had happened. I think because I was now sober, it was almost like I had this new zest for life and I had things to do, don't you know? And because of that, the balance started to tip. And I think when the balance starts to tip, it can really start to tap into my mental health. And looking back now, it had tipped me into quite a deep depression again.
Okay, so it's like you know, if we do too much of this, obviously there's something here that's missing. We're not getting enough of this. So for you, it was your mental health. How is your mental health? I mean, how did you get through that dark period? What did you do? What was it that you...
At that period of time, so at that period of time, do you know what? Looking back on that period of time, I think what I really realised is at that period of time, I don't think, because I've had to go on medication before in my sobriety, but at that period of time I didn't. I think what I did was I really, I had to do it again. I had to let go of the business again, and I had to kind of, do you know, I can't even remember. It was quite a long time ago, but I just remember what that emotional rock bottom did, what that breakdown did is, again, I seem to only learn through being in painful places. And it took me to a place of back to willingness to be willing to be honest with other people about where I was at, what was going on for me. Because again, I think much of my sobriety was look, aren't I doing well? So there was still, and still today, my biggest things are allowing myself to be vulnerable and trusting people with that vulnerability. And that's something that I really realized that I didn't have. I didn't trust people at all.
Yeah. And I think in society as a whole, I think what happens as well, sometimes we think by being vulnerable or letting people know where we are, it's like a bit of a weakness. We can't let you know how we're really feeling. I can't let you know that I'm not doing well. No, I'm taking the meeting, or I'm doing this, I've got that. And underneath, if you ask, it's like if we put ourselves on a pedestal, it's very hard to know that we don't want to fall off that pedestal. Do you know what I mean? And sometimes people put us on that pedestal. A lot of people look at us and think, oh, I really want to aspire. If you've got a lot of people saying to you, I really want to aspire like you, I aspire to be like you, you're doing so great. It's really hard to say, look, I'm not really, I'm struggling. Awesome. So you another rock bottom, another surrender, another transformation. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your happiness, because I know you work, that's what I want to hear about, what you're doing now, and you've got through that. So yeah, tell us a little bit about what you do with the happiness project.
Yeah, do you know what? So the business that I've kind of like, I totally retrained in recovery. I became a life coach. I trained in NLP. I really wanted to kind of, I've always been somebody who's wanted to help people. And I think especially from my own journey with the external search for happiness, I was working with a lot of people, and they were just like, I don't know what would make me happy. And about 5 years ago, I come across something called the Happiness Course, which was put together it's a charity in London called Livability, and it was put together by positive psychologists and also a minister there. But the idea is that they knew that loneliness is killing people. Kind of that part of my journey was about the shame that I felt. And so I think when you feel that shame about yourself, you tend to isolate, you struggle to communicate with other people, you struggle to be in community. So the idea of this course was to bring people together and to start to have conversations around people's definitions of happiness and success. But ultimately it was to bring people together. And that's always been my thing, because of where I've been. And I know the pain associated with loneliness and shame, that I was so passionate about bringing people together. So this course is an 8-hour course based on positive psychology, and it covers, it's all about the transformations through things such as, gratitude, forgiveness, compassion, vulnerability, helping people redefine their definition of success. And I remember I run this in a rehab once, and I didn't know how many were going to be in my group. And I remember opening the door and there were 24 men sat there. And straight away I was like, oh no, I can't do this. And do you know what? To this day, it's been the most powerful session I've ever delivered, because I saw grown men cry and say, I've never been allowed to talk about this stuff. You know, this is why do we not have these conversations? I think this is why people go down the pub and, you know, have to get pissed and to really get to the depth of our truth.
Yeah.
And so it was like, I was like, I want everyone to have access to this. So I started running it from my conservatory, you know, and I just put it out there. Who wants to come on my happiness course? Who wants to be happier? Who wants to, you know, and I was a single parent, funding it all, you know, I was so passionate about bringing people together and just having conversations of depth and meaning and richness, and just cut the bullshit. Like, where are you at? What's going on? How can I support you? You know, and it kind of went from there. Goodness me, I look at all the places I've delivered now. So like I said, rehabs, I worked in a college, I delivered it there. I did retreats. And then as time went on, what started to kind of open up is that for my own journey, I hit 7 years sober, and I realized that I hadn't dealt with some deep-rooted trauma. So I got really involved in breathwork.
Okay.
And it was, for me, was the ultimate. I still realized I was still so trying to be in control, you know, so scared to let go. And I think a lot of the reasons, so what came up from this happiness course is people were like, we know that chasing money doesn't make us happy. We know that shoveling food in my mouth doesn't make me happy, but yet I still do it. What's that about? You know, why is that? And I really started to inquire on that question. Why is it? Why do we still hurt ourselves like that? Why, you know, what is that missing link? And there is this fear, I think, of allowing ourselves to experience pain. You know, I realize a lot of my life and my work has been what I call spiritual bypassing. If I help somebody else, I don't have to feel my own pain. Therefore, I don't have to reach a rock bottom. And I reached a rock bottom again. How many rock bottoms do I want to reach? I've probably still got a lot more to go. 7 years sober. And I was like, some trauma started coming to the surface. So I started doing breath work and getting involved with that. And I tell you what, I cried like a baby. I got in touch with parts of myself that I had denied, that I had never, ever allowed myself to feel. And it was tough. It's a tough journey to get in touch with that stuff. It's not for the faint-hearted, and it's not to be done alone. That's what I realized. I think this healing journey is, especially in the self-help world, is like, we're so busy trying to help ourselves better. When I'm better, when I'm perfect, when I'm this, when I'm that. But that's not the truth, you know, because if I'm constantly looking to get, you know, kind of look at a way on my own how I can fix myself, I'm always going to keep myself excluded from others. And it was through connecting with other people, through being part of a breathwork community, through what I realized is that I had to start to surround myself with what I call people who feel like sunshine, my tribe, people who were safe to share this stuff with. And, you know, so my breathwork teacher started to become a big influence in my life. I have a spiritual mentor in LA who is a Buddhist, but I'm also interested in other areas of, you know, I've been to church, but I started to really look at this spiritual aspect of kind of, why was my ego still attached to what other people thought, or, you know, just that kind of, we can get consumed with social media. How do I look? And the breathwork journey really allowed me to get in touch with parts of me on a, you know, it ripped me open.
Awesome. So tell me, for me and the viewers, what does it mean? What is breathwork? Just give us a little bit. What do you actually do? What does it do? So
the breath work that I'm involved with is called dynamic breathing. So it's a three-part breath that you kind of go in through your belly. So it kind of like goes, and you kind of do that over and over and over again. And what it does is it kind of like shifts stuck energy. And so as you're kind of going through this breath process, because honestly, even I was like, breathing is not going to do anything. I breathe all the time. But this dynamic breathwork process kind of really helps to, you know, I love the saying, your issues are in your tissues. So like trauma, there's like blocked energy that kind of needs to be released, that needs to come out. And yoga's another great way, but it just wasn't doing it for me. So breathwork is kind of this dynamic breathing, is like you go through this process and you kind of go dizzy, you can get like what's called like lobster hands, and you literally feel like, I remember my first breathwork experience and it freaked me out, and I was just like, and it was like, I'm losing control, I'm not in control. And there was this like little voice that went, just breathe through it. And I got through the 20 minutes of dynamic breathing, and then you kind of go into like a meditative state. And that for me is where I get kind of what I call downloads, where I feel this, wow, I'm probably going to sound a bit crazy, but I think I sound a bit crazy all the time anyway. But this connection to spirit, to this realm, to, I have what I call downloads, and this feeling of being protected and nurtured, and but you do this with your breath, so it's your own healing practice. But when it's done in community, in circles, it's incredible, really is amazing.
Yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying. I just wonder, because I kind of know a little bit about breathwork, and I understand about the trauma we carry in our bodies, and our chakras. We need to clear our energy, and it reminds me a little bit about the Kundalini stuff, what the Kundalini yogis do. You know what I mean? And it's like, no, I totally get them, and that's absolutely amazing. So, are you trained in teaching it at the moment, or is it?
Yeah. So for me, I think what I did in this lockdown is I took to Zoom like a duck to water. And I managed to do my breathwork teacher training in LA on Zoom. I just started doing the same thing. I started holding online breathwork circles. I think my whole thing is about bringing people together. How can we heal collectively? Because ultimately, I'm inspired by a vision to see a healed world. Where we love each other back to health. We don't tell each other, this is what you should do, this is how it is, I think a lot of it, a healed world is when we start to get honest, when we start to face our shadows.
Okay.
When we stop acting like everything's all right when it's not.
When we are truest to ourselves, you mean? Yeah. When we accept the pain, we accept that we're hurt. Yeah. And that's only then when we can start healing. And awesome. Yeah. Listen, how can people get hold of you? I'm going to put all your links on here anyway. Are you doing any Zoom classes at the moment? Is there anything happening? What's happening for the future for you?
Oh my goodness. So one of the things that, at the moment, as this is being filmed, we are in a lockdown. So everything I'm doing at the moment is virtual breathwork circles, breathwork, and virtual happiness courses everywhere at the moment. I don't know by the time this goes out if my idea is that I want to be out. I want to collectively kind of finding spaces to bring people together. So the best thing that people can do is to hook me up on Facebook or on my website and get in touch and see what's going on. Yeah.
Awesome. What I'll do, I'll make sure I put all your links on this podcast at the bottom so people can hit the link or whatever. And then hopefully you can, get some people, maybe people are interested and help people heal. And that's what we do,
totally. I love that. That sounds like a great thing to do.
Definitely. Anything else to say, Roxie? Is there anything what is your, I know I kind of know what your message is, so I was going to ask you that question, but who is your role model? Who would you call one of your role models in your life?
Do you know what? All of my role models have come from, I think I really got into studying other people as I got older, as I got into recovery. I think growing up, I wasn't interested in anyone or what anyone was doing. I didn't have it in my family. But I think growing, since I've come into recovery, I'm inspired by people who get through hard times, and I think for me, one of the people that I have been greatly inspired by was Anne Frank, Anne Frank's diaries, and the way that when all else fails, the one thing we are in control of is our mind and kind of how we use that, and her creativity and her optimism, and how, such a beautiful young girl kept going. I think she's was a great role model in how, despite the adversity, despite what was going on, she managed to keep going in just such a beautiful light.
Yeah, man, she was great, wasn't she?
Mm.
Awesome. So, if you could say something to the young Roxie or any other Roxies that are here listening to this, if there was anything you could say, what would you say to her? Or him?
Do you know what? I've actually thought about this question a lot. This is a question I think I would definitely tell her to slow down. Like, where are you going? Where are you running to? Like, there is no destination. Like, this is the journey. You know, this is the journey. Enjoy the ride, even the bumpy parts, because you'll see that they're all meant to be. And I would also say, let go of other people's opinions of you. You know, other people's opinions, expectations, demands, just let them go. You know, don't allow them to run your life. And one other thing that I would say, this is to me, is to dance like no one's watching, even when people are watching. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Well, brilliant. It's been awesome, man. It's really good to kind of get to know you a little bit more and your journey, man. Absolutely well done. And so, listen, anybody that's watching, listening, I will put Roxie's details at the bottom of this podcast, all the links and stuff like that. Remember to hit subscribe and like and share it in all your social media platforms so we can get this wonderful transformation story that Roxie has shared with us out there as well. Okay, thank you. Cheers, Roxie. Absolutely amazing. Well done.
Thank you so much.
Always.
Yo, what's happening, people? I want to welcome you to Flip the Script podcast show. My name is Sol and I am the host. So, on this show, you'll get the opportunity to listen to some inspiring people talking about real, honest, heartfelt, no holds barred transformation stories. We get to hear from ex-drug users, reformed criminals, all sharing their personal stories and how they manage not only to turn their lives around, but now are helping others to do the same. We also get to hear from courageous men and women sharing their experience of surviving high-level trauma and what they are doing or done to start that much-needed healing process. They say that life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forward. On this show, we get to understand what that actually means. Everyone's got a story, but not everyone gets to share theirs. So remember, hit the subscribe button, press like, so we can continue to spread the message that change is possible even in the darkest of places.